All right, Clyde, this is going to be a test of our latency and our skills. You ready for this? This is going to be a broadcast test and a cold open for the podcast. Rock, paper, scissors. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot.
Okay, Jack won.
Jack won. I had scissors. Clyde had paper. Welcome back to Survivor Analytics, the show where we determine the perfect Survivor strategy. I'm the voice of the people. I won rock, paper, scissors, so I get to talk first. My name's Jack. With me, as always, the rock to my scissors. Say hi, Clyde.
What's up, party people? Welcome into the podcast. Don't pick up the idol, because if you do, you'll probably leave the podcast and get voted out in the same episode. So don't pick that up. Stay here with us. Today we are covering episode 11 of Survivor 46. Jack, I'll say this at the beginning. I'm really enjoying this season. I feel like I have been very down on the new era in general. I was pretty low on 44, even lower on 45. This is the best season of the new era, in my opinion. The post-merge has been a surprise at every corner. I don't want to jump the gun too early, but there's a chance that this season breaks my new era rule, which was if you're a new era season, you cannot rank in my top 15 because all of the integral flaws with the show. This season might make it into the top 15. Definitely not the top 10. Let's not get crazy.
So what you're saying is that the new era, right? Mergatory, the double vote, the 26 days, all of that stuff up to this point has inherently kept you from considering these seasons to be top 25 seasons.
Top 15.
Top 15 seasons, thank you. But you're saying that this one could crack it. Is that because of the people? Is that entirely a personal dynamic thing? Or is there anything about the format that has changed?
It's definitely a combination of both. I like the tension amidst this cast. We were talking about this before we started recording, but I feel like this is a season where the contestants are not afraid to go after each other publicly. We see it this week with Liz in her feud with Q, both at camp and at the tribal council. Venus is getting into beef with people. And it's just been a while since we've seen a contentious group like that. So I think the fact that the cast is a bit more authentic, they're not necessarily playing up to have a hyper positive social media presence after the show. And it feels more like old school Survivor because of that. From a gameplay perspective, I don't know if this is the highest quality of contestants, but it's entertaining in a different way. So the cast is elite, probably my favorite cast of the new era so far. And the actual production setup has been great in the post-merge. I don't think we've had any legitimate production interference since the Mergatory. There's been no absurd twists where contestants are losing votes or they're splitting up the group. Production tries to add that BS to the game. They did it with the rice offering where Jeff wanted people to sacrifice their votes. But that's why the cast is great, because they turn him down.
I was going to say production is desperately trying to get rice in these people's bellies and as a side effect, tamper with the dynamic of the actual game. But yeah, they have not succeeded.
But that's my overall thought. And this episode just continues that trend of another contestant that I did not expect to go home this week, ended up walking out the door.
Oh, I saw this coming.
What? No, you did not.
I saw this coming.
I feel like we've been talking about Venus being the 0 vote finalist for a while.
I wrote down, let me see if I can find it in my notes. They are messier than normal. I wrote down pretty early, I think Venus is going home. As soon as Venus had the idol, I knew. Is that crazy? Like,
I thought the same thing because she says in confessional that she has additional safety in the game, and I thought I've seen this story play out the past, 2-3 episodes. But this kind of transitions well to one of my introductory questions for the pod. Because with this Venus elimination, the count of contestants voted out with an idol in their pocket this season moves up to 4. And if you include the random medical evacuation in the pre-merge, that goes up to 5. So what do you think is the reasoning for this trend in Survivor 46? Is it the gameplay style, or is it just poor strategic reads?
I think every single time, every single one of these contestants has said to the camera, I'm saving my idol to use it later, right? At some point or another, they have indicated in confessional an inclination to be conservative and to hold on to it. And it's a combination of that initial mindset of, I want to be careful, and then followed by misreading dynamics at Tribal or ahead of Tribal. Because to look at Tiffany's, right? She said, I want to hold on to it. And then she said, I'm willing to burn it to just get it out of my pocket, and then still misread, right? Yeah, I think it's a combination of being conservative, wanting to hold on to it, and then misreading where you're at in the present.
I definitely agree with what you're saying in terms of the confidence surrounding holding the idol, because when you look at the players that have been voted out with idols in their pockets, we have two groups. We have the public idol finders and the non-public ones. So your public players are Tiffany and Hunter, people who found the idol, told it spread around the beach, and that painted a target on their backs. So for them, it makes sense why they went home, because contestants had an incentive to eliminate them. On the other side, you have the non-public idol finders in Gem and Venus. And while they did not directly tell other players about their possession of the idol, their gameplay changes once they find it. You probably remember when Gem found her idol, she jumps on like the offensive side. She tries to find the target of the minority. She approaches Ben with the machete.
Yeah.
That kind of came out of nowhere for Gem. Venus does the same thing this week, where she had a couple solid episodes in a row. I still don't think her social gameplay was that great, but strategically, she was doing fine. Like, she was left out of the vote the previous week, but it wasn't a disastrous strategic game. But when she finds the idol, her gameplay shifts as well. She gets cocky, and she later leaks that to Charlie.
When we get back to that, it's the most ridiculous.
Long story short, with players getting voted out with idols in their pocket, I think it's a factor of it being public, their own personalities once they find the idol. And then the third biggest factor is really the anticipation of making a big move. You kind of hit on this too, where I think holding an idol is not necessarily a conservative move. It's actually aggressive to wait and bide your time with it. And this cast, before they went out there, watched Survivor 43 in its completion. And I know we didn't cover that one on the pod, but to give you a little bit of context, Jack, at the final 6 of that season, you have an idol play that's in the conversation for the best idol play in the history of the show. It's easily in the top 5.
Okay.
So these contestants just saw a very flashy move at Tribal Council, and they probably want to wait for their time to make a similar move and get that stamp on their resume. So I think those past seasons have an influence.
That lag time is interesting. I think that's a great point of, like, if you see this move work and you go, oh, that move was really good, there's a long time. There's going to be a couple seasons between then and now, right? Oh, I should go for the same thing, right? I think there's something to that for sure.
And I think this cast saw the majority or all of 44, which is interesting because 44's tribal dynamics were the Tika 3 sticking together and running all the way to the end, yet this cast doesn't have a similar core alliance. So it's interesting to think about how those past seasons have influence. But I'm all set to hop in if you are, with the camp right after the Tiffany elimination.
We're back in night vision, baby. We get back to camp. And once again, I mean, it is the visual language of the season. Night vision and drone shots. Kenzie is very upset that she was not in the vote. She's upset that the move went on without her. She goes off on her own, and Charlie goes to her. And this was an interesting tone setter for Charlie, I think. The Charlie-Kenzie conversation where he emphasizes that was Maria's move, right? I'm sorry your idea was taken from you. I get it. You know, I'm sorry we left you out of it. I started thinking at this point, the Charlie-Maria betrayal is coming.
Oh, for sure. I still think it's coming. It's just a matter of when.
And I think it's interesting as this episode develops, the show does a good job of managing the tension between, will he bail on Maria, right? Because he is very willing throughout this episode to distance himself from her to others, right? He is willing to, for Kenzie, Liz, and Venus, right, say, oh, Maria's the worst. She's got to go. I don't work with her.
How do you feel about Charlie's overall approach with crediting Maria for the move? Because he's kind of counterculture with it. I feel like everybody else on this cast, the second a vote happens, there's arguments over who got the stamp on their resume. Like when Tevin went out at Final 10, Liz wanted it to be clear that she was the one that orchestrated that blindside. Similarly, Maria wants everybody to know that she's the one that knocked out Tiffany. Charlie's taking the opposite approach of pushing the blame to other people, which on one hand lowers his threat level, but I'm also worried that people won't perceive him as a legitimate contender. Like, how do you see Charlie balancing those two factors?
I think he's being really intentional with it in a great way, which is that he knows that Maria knows that they're number ones, right? That they've been tight, that they've made all these decisions together, and that when they are one-on-one, they're on the same page. And then they are taking very different tacts in presenting themselves to everybody else, right? And he knows, right, Maria wants credit for this, and Maria does take charge on it, right? He works with her on it, but he knows it's Maria's move, and he knows that it's going to get her some heat. And so his choice to give her flowers and distance himself in the moment, I think it's great. I really like it because being in the deputy's chair is a tricky spot when the sheriff is immune, right? And we see that in this episode. If your number one has a lot of heat on them and they're out of contention for a vote, you're gone. And his willingness to say, oh, Maria and Q are the powerhouses. That's the dynamic duo. Fantastic. I love it. I thought it was fantastic.
See, I like it from the outside looking in. Like I said on TikTok this week that I think Charlie's playing the best game on the entire island. My worry, though, is that other contestants perceive him as a follower of Maria. And I think whenever Charlie flips on Maria, there's a chance that the credit will go to the other players on the beach, and the jury will say, all of you convinced Charlie to flip against his number one.
I think he's setting that tone really well here,
But
though.
we literally get a confessional from Kenzie this week where she just describes Charlie as Maria's Jester. So I think he has to overcome that perception, and I'm scared that he won't be able to do it. Like, he can easily defeat Liz and Ben in the end, but I get worried when it's Charlie versus Kenzie in the end, or Charlie versus Q, and whether or not that reputation will end up haunting him.
Yeah, I think that how I read it this week and going into next week is he's making that distance, right? He's taking a step back from Maria and willing to criticize her, willing to talk about her as a threat. And I think that will only continue to develop. The fact that he's building it slowly, I like, because it makes him look like a more deliberate player. He's not changing his mind. He's not switching the conversation.
I'm just worried that, especially with the vote this week, he ends up falling into the plan that Maria wants. So he's encouraging that perception that some players like Kenzie might already have. Other thing I want to note from this opening is that the last tribal council, the Tiffany elimination, was Maria's move. And
yeah,
I thought going back to camp that edit would focus primarily on Maria. And we get some screen time from her where she pitches like a final five. She's there kind of like a supervillain right by the fire.
Oh, and the night vision does her totally dirty. I don't know what it is about the night vision. Makes her eyebrows look insane.
Okay.
Like some people look totally normal in night vision, and then her eyebrows look like drawn on in post. It's crazy. I don't know how that happens, but
she gets
anyway.
that screen time as she deserves. But I feel like the storyline after the Tiffany boot was more Kenzie getting left out rather than Maria earning this stamp on her resume. So that entire saga just solidified my belief that I've had since probably the final 10. I still think Kenzie's winning this whole thing.
Kenzie's got merch.
I don't know. I just see it happening. The way the edit plays her up, because there were other people that were left out of that vote other than Kenzie, like a Liz and a Venus, and they weren't shown at all.
But it was Kenzie's idea, right? And it was Kenzie's number one. And so much time was spent in episode 10 focusing on Kenzie saying, this is my resume making move, right? And then her saying the whole thing about her heart song, right? And being like, the focus on Kenzie, I think, is because of her centrality, I don't know if that's a word, her central position in the development of the idea, and then her stepping back from it and it continuing under its own power.
Want to go to the next morning?
Yeah, idol hunting. We got idol fever. Everybody's hunting except Liz, who at this point, I think the camera has decided to just kind of do her dirty. Everybody else is frantically idol hunting all over the island. And we get an extended shot of Liz snoring asleep in camp.
This is not the first time that we've received a segment like this. In the pre-merge, the Nami camp was searching for the idol, and Liz was asleep at the shelter. So it's kind of ridiculous how much dodo content Liz receives here, between sleeping during the idol searches to her open targeting of Q to her comments on her allergies, which we will hit on later. Like, I feel like the edit is going out of its way to portray Liz in a negative light. I used to think that Venus is the season's 0 vote finalist, but now I think Liz has a warm seat waiting for her at the end, but no votes to go along with it.
Liz has a seat with a cushion, popcorn, and licorice 100% waiting for her. And Venus finds the idol. And there's no twist. There's no challenge. There's no beware. It is just a straight up idol.
Do you prefer it that way for this stage of the game?
I don't know, man. I mean, it's a 90-minute episode. We have one challenge where they take an agonizing amount of time to do a little maze balance thing.
Whoa, you're the challenge guy. You want less challenge?
But here's what I'm saying is the challenge this week is really dragged out. And if that could have been replaced by Venus trying to be subtle and activate an immunity idol, that would have been great. But I do appreciate the lack of twist at this point in the game.
That's fair. I will say, I feel like Venus finding the idol is full circle for her story, because in the early game, Randon finds the clue to the Beware advantage, and I watched his exit interview, and he asked production if he could pass that clue to Venus before he left the show, and they didn't let him do it. So Venus had an opportunity to get an idol way back in episode 3, and now she finally acquires it. Granted, she only has it for 24 hours, but she got to hold it.
That's kind of poetic. I mean, she gets to walk out with it. That's a nice souvenir.
I think they take the idol back. I don't think you can.
That's a shame.
I don't think you get to go home with it as a little souvenir.
Well, I wonder what they do with it. Then they just have a box of them sitting somewhere.
I think they sell them to raise money for charity or something like that. They'll do a big auction with all the different memorabilia. So that's everything with the idol search.
We have an extended thing of Kenzie and Venus, as Kenzie is idol hunting, right? And basically Kenzie says, yeah, I really trust Venus. She's one of the only people on the island who hasn't lied to me. And then they're idol hunting, and Kenzie says, do you think somebody found it? And Venus is like, I don't know. I don't think so. Straight at, lying to Kenzie. So, and nothing comes of that, but we do see a little bit of a dynamic there, which I think we are getting to see the Kenzie-Venus, not even alliance, just relationship, so that we see Kenzie trying to make moves, right? Because I think Kenzie feels very helpless coming out of the Tiffany vote. And then, good news.
Oh, no.
We've got an animal shot.
Oh, okay.
And it's not just one animal shot, Clyde. It's 2 animal shots.
Ooh.
Back to back. I'm going to describe, let me paint you a word picture, and then you tell me what scene and what conversation you think is coming.
Oh, like which contestants are represented?
Exactly. First, we have a sandy beach and 2 little crabs. Crab walking along, going about their business. And then we have 2 birds flying in the sky. Who do you think is going to have a conversation after these back-to-back animal shots?
So I would guess. So are there 4 contestants here?
It's just a pair of contestants, but we see 2 pairs because the production is saying, we see you, Jack, we hear you, and you're right. And we're going to really hammer this one home so that Jack knows he's right.
I hope one day we get to talk to someone behind the camera at Survivor so we can ask them about these animal shots. I think there's a chance that they see the crabs on the beach and they go, oh, that would be good transition footage. Let's get some meaningless crab shots. And they just throw it in at random points.
I'm completely reading into coincidence is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think there's a chance.
There's a chance.
I would guess that the crabs are your bottom feeders. They're about to get swept up by the waves. So I would say that your crabs are Venus and Liz.
Oh, let me be clear. The crabs and the birds represent the same two people.
Oh, I thought it was like the crabs are the lowly ones. And then I was going to say the birds would be like Maria and Q, the two top dogs.
It's crabs, pair of birds, pair of people talking.
Oh, I'll still stick with Liz and Venus, though.
You are not correct. It is Charlie and Maria having their little post Tiffany elimination discussion where Charlie's basically like, good job.
That's something I want to give Charlie respect for as well, where I don't get the vibe that Charlie has any kind of ego regarding the strategic side of the game. He has no issue pushing the credit to other people. And it's tough because I'm sure from his perspective, he wants to build stuff on his resume, but he has to kind of go to Maria and stroke her ego a bit and say, oh, you're playing so great. And it ends up working out because, as far as I know, Maria seems oblivious to the fact that Charlie is eyeing her up and planning for her downfall.
They are willing to work together until Charlie says so, and Maria will not know it. We don't get one confessional from her where she's questioning it at all. Oh, and then Kenzie calls Charlie a jester.
With Kenzie calling Charlie a jester, this kind of hits on the topic of perceptions on the beach versus perceptions for the viewer. And another dynamic that I wanted to talk about here was the Q-Maria relationship, where they are now perceived as one of the tightest pairs on the island, which shocked me. I felt like Maria and Charlie were the real core pair. And some players are saying now that Q is a legitimate threat to win the game. Kenzie says in confessional that Maria and Q are the most likely winners if they reach the end. And Maria, I can understand. She's been on the right side of the vote every time. She just orchestrated the Tiffany blindside. But do you genuinely think that if Q makes it to the end, he wins the season?
This is a hard thing because I think that there's one way that Q wins, and that's if he manages to convince the jury that reaching the end via insanity is a legitimate strategy, right?
Well, what do you mean by insanity?
He's thrown the game into chaos over and over. He's tried to quit. He's had these dramatic smoke screens, right? He has said in almost every tribal, like in front of the jury, he has said, I go into every jury ready to go home. He has no qualms about it. He says things like, I'm waiting for people to play with me. I'm not trying to play with people at this point. He is actively portraying himself as ready to go home if he's voted out, and passive and receptive rather than active strategically.
Well, maybe he's intentionally presenting himself as the underdog of the cast, right?
Right. And so if those tactics that he is claiming and presenting himself as using get him to the end, the question becomes, can he convince this jury that works? And this is a jury that has Tiffany, who does not like him, Venus, who does not like him, potentially Liz, who hates him, potentially Kenzie, who does not like him, potentially Ben, who does not like him.
Yeah.
Is that 5? I think that's 5.
I think that's 5, yeah.
Tevin, Hunter, Soda, Charlie, Maria. That's 5 in each hand. 5 people that might be convinced that that tactic is legitimate, and 5 people whose dislike of him is too strong to, I think, be swayed by any argument he makes. It could happen.
It's just absurd to me that the players on the beach now see him as this big threat to win, despite him holding little agency. Because if you look at Q's game, his attempt to quit at the final 10 marks a major shift. Because up until that point in the season, Q was calling the shots. Yeah, he had a lot of agency on the original Yanu tribe. He establishes the cross-tribal 6, which materialized to literally nothing. But he made those efforts to establish those in the early merge. And then when he attempts to quit at final 10, he loses all of his agency, and he has a more passive approach, right? There's scenes of him laying down on the beach and waiting for other players to approach him. And I think if he makes it to the final tribal, he can make the argument that I'm one of the most adaptable people here. I was a lead strategist in the early game, and when things flipped in the other direction, I knew how to lay low and avoid the target when I could have been an easy boot, between the final 10 and the final 7.
And so to that end, right, him waiting on the beach and him making the Meat Boy majority, those are the two things that led to this current perception of him and Maria as the threats. Because he waited on the beach and Maria came to him.
Yeah.
Maria was in the Meat Boy majority, right? I don't know if she started in it or she was added to it.
She was added by Tim.
Tim's not here, right? And Maria is still here and Q is still here. And they have continued to work together. I think there are some legitimate claims there, but people dislike him too much. I think there's too much bad blood, and this is not a season where the jury will be objective.
A more Samoa-esque jury, a more socially based jury.
Yeah, the jury is not going to decide based on quality of move alone. The jury is going to take personal opinion and vendetta into account 1,000%.
The only last thing that I would throw out here before the challenge is that Venus, Liz, and Kenzie pull Charlie aside, and they make the pitch to eliminate Maria. Charlie says, maybe we could do Q instead. As we'll see with the challenge, Maria ends up earning individual immunity. But if you had to predict, if Maria loses this challenge, would Charlie have flipped on her this round?
I think here's the problem for Charlie, right? It's deciding when to flip and who else is a big threat, right? Because Maria is a massive threat. And if he takes Maria out now, he still has Ben, right? If he can convince, hopefully, right? He doesn't want to alienate Ben by saying, oh, I just took out one of our old tribe mates. I think it totally depends on who wins the challenge.
See, I'm in the camp that I think Maria was safe regardless of the outcome of the challenge. I don't think Charlie was ready to flip on her.
He wants to flip at final 6.
Oh, yeah. We'll talk about Charlie's long-term outlook because I think I have a sense of what he's going for, and I also have my prediction for how these last couple rounds will play out. But let's go to the challenge. This is all you.
Probably the worst challenge I can remember from this season, to be honest with you. I'm pretty low on this one. Pretty forgettable. It's an obstacle course where at every stage you have to be balancing a ball on a pole, and at every stage the pole gets longer. And then at the end, you have to navigate the ball through a maze. Everybody's dropping. Everybody is in contention at the end because the obstacle course is just a waste of everyone's time. It comes down to Venus or Maria. Venus fails literally at the end, and Maria wins. And they're playing not only, I guess I should have said this earlier, not only are they playing for immunity, they are playing for reward. And the reward is pizza, pepperoni, Hawaiian, and gluten-free. And as soon as Jeff said gluten-free and we saw Liz look happy, I knew Liz was not getting this reward.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I want to say with Liz, I think she is destined to not eat on this season. In some way or another,
Liz will
not have a meal. She has the individual rice, but I don't know if she can make the fire to actually cook it. I think if this was a challenge where 6 out of the 7 got food and they were just drawing names out of a hat, the one name that would not get drawn would be Liz. She is destined to not eat. Even if she makes it to the end, I think there's a chance that production gives them the final 3 breakfast that has just a bunch of food that she cannot eat due to her allergies and suppressed anger.
Oh, that'd be so funny. You know, if the reward on this challenge was they all got one piece of pizza, she'd drop hers in the sand. Like...
I'll also say that there's a moment in this challenge where I wrote down, oh yeah, Ben is here, because he doesn't have a single confessional for the first 45 minutes of this episode.
Yeah.
I really like Ben. I think he's a fun presence on the show, but as the season progresses, I'm becoming more and more aware that he's not winning this thing. I think
he's got a Jake vibe.
I think it's worse than a Jake vibe, because at least Jake was narrating his route to 45, and as a viewer, you were learning why he loses in the end.
Yeah.
Ben just isn't there the majority of the time.
Yeah.
I think right now, if I were to do a power ranking of the 6, Liz is number 6 in terms of most likely to win, but Ben might be at number 5. I think Q is a better shot than Ben right now.
Yeah. I mean, Ben's path to victory is through friendship and vibes, right? That's it. He has no resume. He has no big move.
This is the jury that could pick based on vibes.
Yeah.
So that's like his one glimmer of hope in the game.
Yeah, it's a shame. Maria wins. And now the question is, who's getting pizza? We find out as Maria is deliberating that Liz has been sharing her rice with Venus, which I think in Maria's mind means that they don't deserve food. She picks Ben first. And let's start there. How do you feel about the Ben choice? Ben bursts into tears here.
I think this is a good pick. Ben is someone that I think would value the selection more. Mm-hmm. He plays a little bit more with his heart. Mm-hmm. And my current understanding of the Sega dynamics is that it's Charlie in the middle as the connector between Maria and Ben. Yep. So this is Maria's opportunity to build that relationship and potentially rely on Charlie a little bit less.
Yeah. On that note, Charlie recuses himself at this stage. And Charlie says, yeah, I'm okay. Pick somebody else. Like, other people are hungrier than me. I love this move from Charlie.
I think it's an acknowledgement of the other player's condition. I think he probably earned a couple brownie points with the Liz's of the world. And it shows that he's kind of comfortable in his strategic positioning where he's already close with Maria. He's already close with Ben. Why go on the reward and make that public to everybody else?
I think Charlie comes away from this move having improved his standing with everybody, right? Because if you think about it, he's signaling to Maria, I trust you, build other relationships. He's signaling to Q, I'm good, I don't need to eat. Q likes a tough guy, right? Q likes, a macho mentality. He's signaling to Liz and Kenzie, I'm selfless, let somebody else eat. Venus probably hates that because Venus hates everybody. But you know what? Like, I don't understand what's going on in her head. And so it's a great little move. And then we get a very long pause. So long that Jeff comments that he thinks this is the longest deliberation to bring somebody along in the history of the show. And what Maria decides, and she vocalizes some of this, she's like, I know Liz needs to eat, but I know she's had rice. Q took me on the reward last week, so I feel like I need to return the favor. That's what she's stuck between, which is wild.
Oh, for sure. I think she's close enough with Q to the point where she doesn't need to bring him on this to impress him more.
No.
And Q's well fed from the previous reward. But what she does here is she takes out her scroll. And what's the name of the person in like a medieval court that reads to the rest of the group?
Oh, like the Herald.
So she has a Jester in Charlie, but not a Herald yet.
She's her own Herald.
Then she takes out the scroll and she says, hear ye. We will have 2 contestants compete in a duel.
A game, a jest for us all.
So you can have my 3rd seat in my cabinet.
Dance for me, puppets.
That's what she says. And she looks at Q, the tallest, strongest guy in the entire group, and says, you will compete against malnourished Liz in a game of chance.
Q is still buzzed from his shark bowl, and Liz is over here, like, barely awake.
Before they even started rock, paper, scissors, I knew Liz was not going to win. I knew Q had it in the bag. And I think she asked him to throw the duel.
Yeah, she says, pick rock. And I think in the end, he picks paper and she picks rock.
Wait, so she asked him to pick rock and then she herself picks rock?
I think so. I think that was the move because he does not throw it, right? He does try to win and does win. And it's awkward. I mean, it's a bad vibe for sure. Friend of the show, my mom, had some choice comments about this that I won't relate verbatim. But do you think Maria gets some hate from this, for this move, from both people on the island and people in the real world? Would it have been better if she had just gone Q and not deliberated? If she hadn't had the long wait and she'd gone, Ben, I know you need to eat. Q, you took me on the last reward. Bing, bang, boom. No deliberation, not even saying another person's name. Would that have gone over better?
I think so. Because it's just an odd power dynamic to make 2 contestants compete for food. As a viewer, I loved it. I think it just added another level of spice to the episode. But I think that would have still pissed people off. but not to the same extent. And I think it also infuriates Liz knowing that she could have won the duel and earned the spot in the 3-person reward.
For sure. It's not like she told them to arm wrestle and Liz was guaranteed to lose. Like, it was complete chance.
Yeah.
I kind of wish we'd had like a very prolonged rock, paper, scissors duel. Like, they keep tying.
They keep doing rock.
Yeah, like they keep doing rock and then they're like, all right, for real this time. And then they both go scissors. Like, yeah, I think the combination of giving Liz hope, for one thing, not being decisive herself, right? Maria does not take full ownership of that choice, right? That's a challenging thing to do, and to say choosing reward at all, right? Last week, Austin was talking about how you don't want to be the one who makes the choice because it can blow back on you. And she narrows the field. She makes a choice, but does not make the choice. And it's not a good look.
Yeah. And I think, kind of going back to the interview with Austin from last week, I think Maria's biggest mistake here is not the fact that she set up the duel or that she selected Q, but it's that she did not communicate with the other contestants beforehand. Like, I think before you go into any challenge on Survivor, you should be talking with people and giving them the heads up about who you would select if you win. Especially if you're somebody like Maria, who is a strong physical competitor. It's a realistic outcome that she goes on to win the challenge.
Yeah.
So I wish she had taken the time beforehand to at least approach Liz and say, I owe Q for picking me last time. So you know now. I'm not going to surprise you with it at the actual challenge.
Yeah.
And that way, when the group divides, you're not going to have as much shit talking because it won't be fresh for those players that are not selected for the reward. So that's something I really appreciated that Austin mentioned last week, is that he would work to build those bridges before he had to tear any of them down.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Let's go to the losers back at camp, where people are upset with Maria.
Yeah, so my quote is Charlie. As far as I'm concerned, Q is Maria's number one. He is playing both sides so well here, right? Because now when everybody comes back together for Liz, Venus, and Kenzie, Charlie's Angels too.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, you're right. Charlie's Angels one didn't turn out too well.
He's on their side as far as they're concerned. But when he goes to have a conversation with Maria and she goes, well, wait a minute, I heard that you were working with them. He goes, no, I'm just letting them think that so that I can bring information back. He is in a perfect double agent position.
But the losers are all pissed. Charlie does a good job at portraying Maria as the villain. Even though this is a negative on Maria's resume, I still think if she were to make it to the end, she beats anybody out of the remaining 6. I don't think the players would be so bitter to pull the win from Maria or anything like that.
I'll say this. Some of them would, but not enough of them. Liz would.
Maybe Liz, but I don't think this would be a detrimental move by any means, because sometimes you'll see that in Survivor where someone has one bad social play and it ruins their chances for the rest of the season.
Right.
So I didn't have much from that segment. I have some comments for when the two groups come back together. Over at the food reward, I don't have many notes either. My main note was that Q hops in confessional, and even Q recognizes that he should not have been selected.
Yeah.
But he ate 23 slices, I think, of pizza.
Holy crap. I don't think I caught that. That's fantastic. Yeah. Good for him. Couple things I wrote down from the feast. Maria says, if looks could kill, I was slaughtered today. Ben says, it's fine. Liz has rice, which I thought was hilarious. Like, you're eating like hot pizza. There were 8 boxes of pizza there. It was so much pizza for 3 people.
To be fair, it's Survivor pizza, which is widely regarded as one of the worst rewards you can win on the show.
Why is that? Is it just because it's, pizza on Fiji, an island not known for pizza?
Yeah, they get the pizza locally, and the majority of the time it is not that good. There are contestants that say after the show that they really only ate it because they were starving, but the quality is pretty poor.
Man.
It's not the same as the Applebee's where they bring the chef out.
And then just a little thing to throw out there. Ben, as he's eating pizza, says, I feel like a Ninja Turtle right now, which, A, great line. B, if you have Paramount Plus, and for Survivor, like I do, the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie, the animated one, fantastic.
Oh, I've heard great things
good.
about it.
It is really great.
I've seen the animation style, and it's cool. It looks a little bit like Spider-Verse from what I remember.
It totally took that kind of comic booky, really dynamic style. It is fantastic. It's one of my favorite movies of 2024, for sure.
Did they just add it to Paramount Plus? Is that why Ben included that in the edit?
It's definitely been on there for a while. It's the only thing besides Survivor I've ever downloaded on Paramount Plus to watch on a plane.
That's a very specific award. Like, of things you've downloaded on Paramount Plus to watch on a plane.
Like, because I've watched so much of this season specifically on a plane. I was supposed to watch this episode on a plane and then didn't. I ended up being stuck in an airport during this whole episode and missed it live because I was trying to get on a plane. But, like, Survivor and flights and travel are so linked in my brain now that that's all I think about. But so shout out to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and that's all I've got before everybody gets back together.
Maybe we'll get more Paramount Plus plugs. Like a contestant will get a intellectual part of a challenge correct, and then they'll hop in confessional and say, "I feel like young Sheldon now."
Oh, see, I was gonna say, like, if they get something actually intellectual, not like young Sheldon, which is not actually intellectual, they'll say like, "Oh, I feel like Frasier." We get some of the most awkward moments of the season when everybody gets back together. There's a point where the four ladies are sitting around camp and Maria is trying to justify her choice. And Liz starts just throwing mud all over the place, right? And starts actively shitting on Q as Q walks up.
Well, the other players say, "Oh, Liz, like Q is right there." And she says, "I don't care. I wrote down a quote. I'm so done with being quiet when someone ticks me off." And I don't remember Liz ever being quiet when someone takes her off.
Nope.
Like, just last week, she blew up at Q in front of the whole tribe. This isn't a new revelation for her.
She frames it as one, though. Like, she frames it in confessional as, like, what I've learned on Survivor is to not be silent when people wrong me. She has not been silent when anybody has wronged her. Like, it doesn't feel like a lesson she learned today.
This is something I said last week, but I still do not understand why Liz hates Q so much. Because she had animosity towards him before the entire reward situation last episode. So this entire dynamic between them feels out of nowhere to me. She then claims that the reason she has allergies is because she is suppressing her own anger. And as someone that works in healthcare, I can tell you, Liz, that your allergies were probably there before the anger was.
That's crazy. I think I missed that line.
You missed that line? I had to pause it, rewind, and hear it again just to make sure I heard it correctly because it was so ridiculous at first.
I think her animosity towards Q, it's the resume fixation, right? It's the fixation of this season on every player wants to make their move. And the move that she was convinced was her move was the Tevin elimination, right?
Yeah.
And Q's antics ruined that move on her resume, right?
Well, the thing is, the move still went through. Like, all Q did was kind of embarrass himself at the tribal council. This isn't a situation where, you know, Maria and Charlie undercut her and left her out of the vote. It's just Q being a prominent figure in that one moment.
But in her mind, in her perception of that moment, it was, Q is stealing my thunder. I want this to be a quick tribal. Like, I think what Liz wanted was a Drew-style tribal council, right? Where everybody gets up there, says some meaningless, harmless, useless stuff, wastes precious oxygen on God's green earth, and then goes, all right, let's go to tribal, having contributed nothing to the strategic discussion, and then, whoa, the vote happens, right? She wants a khaki tribal. She wants an oatmeal tribal, and Q gives us a croque monsieur. She wants bland discussion so that her vote shines, and instead there's so much drama that she feels like the results don't speak for themselves. I would point out, if the results don't speak for themselves, then maybe it wasn't that good to begin with.
I think for the finale, when the time comes, I might make a video of overs and unders for players in that last episode. And one of them will be over under jury votes. So I'll need to set a line for Liz. And I think her line might be 0.5. Like, does Liz get one jury vote on the season? And I'm leaning towards no right now. I can't think of a single player.
Yeah, I was about to say, is there one player? And I'm going to say, no, there is not. Except maybe if the final three is Maria, Q, Liz, I could see Venus voting for Liz.
Oh, I could see that too. Just based on vibes, and the two of them were chilling at the bottom.
Yeah, they shared rice, and so they didn't need pizza.
You want to hit on some strategic discussions now before Tribal Council?
Yeah, let's talk about the girls want Q, and they want to bring in Charlie. Let's talk about the Venus thing. Venus goes to Charlie. They're talking strategy, and Venus is saying, let's go for Q, and Charlie's like, okay. And what if he's got the idol, right? Floats that, right? Which I like. Raising a good question, just seeing what the backup plan is for the ladies. Charlie's Angels 2, got to have a backup. Charlie's Angels 2 are already the backup to Charlie's Angels 1.
The sequel to Charlie's Angels 1.
And Venus is like, don't worry about that. We got that covered. She says, I've got something up my sleeve. The sirens need to be going off in Charlie's head, and they do.
Yeah, he asked her directly, do you have an advantage? And she goes, no, but if everything goes according to plan this week, I have some information for you, which is as close as you can get to saying, I have an idol, without actually saying it. I don't understand why Venus makes this move. It is one of her biggest mistakes on the season, because you tell me what you think about this, but I wonder if Venus does not say that, if Q is the player that ends up going home. I think this is one of the biggest reasons that Charlie elects to continue to work with Maria.
It's 100% part of that. And the show is merciless in this one, right? Venus, in confessional earlier, after she found the idol, said, I'm not telling anybody about this. And then as soon as she gets a chance to be a little smug, because here's the thing about Venus, is she likes to be smug. As soon as she gets the chance with Charlie, she's like, I don't know, wink. It's not on CBS, it's on NBC, but don't you love that show, American Idol? Wink, wink. Like, I sure wish we had a competition show with idols on it. Like, it's so blatant. And Charlie's like, do you have something or not? And she's like, I don't know. Maybe.
Would it have been better if she was straight up and said, listen, Charlie, I have an idol. Work with me here. We can use this down the line. You think that would have been better than being a little bit cagey with it?
Yes, because what she's saying, and she says this to him as well. She says, I will trust you after this vote.
Yeah.
She says, when this vote goes through, I will trust you, meaning we can work together, and if I have this information, it will come out after this vote.
By saying that too, you're essentially telling Charlie, I don't trust you right now. I need some kind of tangible evidence on your end for us to work together.
Yeah, you're telling him to earn it.
So from his perspective, his options are work with someone that does not trust me or someone that does. Why would he continue to roll with Venus? So he's in an interesting spot here between these two groups of three.
I've got a quote from Charlie, and this is one of those little aphorisms that actually is really well done, I think. He describes the dynamic at camp as a double-edged sword that's also pointed at you. That's a great line, and it really does describe the situation right now. He also, at one point, when he and Kenzie are strategizing, says, here's the Taylor Swift's honest truth, which I think means that Taylor Swift is Charlie's God. Because most people would say, here's the God's honest truth.
Oh, you're right.
And he replaces God in that particular turn of phrase with Taylor Swift, which makes sense.
You have Charlie, you have the Angels, and above all of them is Taylor Swift overseeing the entire operation.
Charlie's Angels are angels from Taylor Swift's heaven. Yeah, that's a good point. Their halos are vinyl records of whatever her new album is called.
But I want to talk about Charlie's decision here, where he can align with the women to eliminate Q, or align with the Segas plus Q to eliminate Venus. Yep. What do you think is the optimal move for Charlie at this stage of the game?
Knowing that Venus obviously has something or knows something.
Yeah.
Kenzie doesn't know anything about any object, right? Like, if I stick with the ladies, I'm on the bottom. At this vote, we see Maria's immune. If we see Q go home, right? All of a sudden, we've got Charlie back in the deputy seat. Charlie's gone if Maria's immune, right? If Maria wins a challenge, Charlie is gone, potentially. And so by sticking with the Segas plus Q, he puts himself in a comfortable majority where he is not public enemy number 1 or 2.
And that's why I think it's the optimal move for him. There is the potential drawback of people perceiving him as Maria's follower, but I think Charlie has now expertly set himself up for the end game, where with Modern Survivor, the goal is no longer to make it to Final 3. The goal is to make it to Final 4, because at that stage, it's just a matter of immunity challenge or fire making, right? You don't really plan in the same way as you did back before season 35, where you actually had to vote somebody out in that last round, right? So if Charlie's goal is to make it to 4, he has made it clear that his Final 4 does not include Q and it does not include Maria. So by leaving the 2 of them in as 2 big targets, you just need to knock them out in the next 2 rounds. And I think that's very possible, barring some kind of idol situation or immunity win streak. And since Charlie knew about Venus's potential possession of the idol, he's going to be one of the most aggressive people searching for it when they come back to camp next week. So I think there's a chance that Charlie can go and find that idol.
That'd be great.
From his perspective, you knock out some combination of Q and Maria at 6 and 5. You get to the Final 4 with those 3 women, and then you're just a fire-making challenge away from winning the whole thing.
Yeah.
I am worried that Charlie could still potentially lose to Kenzie in the end, even after knocking out Maria and Q. But at least then he has an obvious winning scenario against Ben and Liz. My prediction right now is that Maria and Q go out in some combination at 6 and 5, and then I'm going to say Charlie loses fire at 4, and then you end up kind of with this group of the scraps at the Final 3 in Liz, Ben, and Kenzie, where Kenzie ends up winning.
Do you think for Charlie, the narrative of I intentionally played quiet and close to Maria, and that got me to the end, I was on the right side for all of these votes until I flipped on her, because it seems like he's about to flip on her. Is that a winning narrative, right?
Yeah, 100%, especially given the knowledge of Venus's idol. Because some people might see this vote by Charlie and say, you're just following Maria. She wants to knock out Venus and you stepped in line. But if Charlie can reach the end and say, Venus told me some information that changed my opinion, and then Venus would be on the jury to confirm it and say, he read me correctly that I was holding an idol. So I think there's a real world where Charlie can explain this well. And I think he's playing the best game on the island.
Yeah. So let's go to Tribal.
Some highlights. Jeff brought licorice now.
Twizzlers.
Were they Twizzlers? Were they red or were they black?
They're red, but he can't say Twizzlers on, or maybe they're red vines.
Oh, yeah. But I feel like that's a sign that Jeff is getting up there in age. I think like my grandparents really like licorice.
Black licorice is the worst. I'll say that.
I don't think I've had black licorice.
It's awful because red licorice is technically like cherry.
Yeah.
Black licorice is just licorice flavored.
Oh.
And that's a horrible flavor. It's disgusting.
Well, Jeff seems to enjoy it, at least to an extent. I hate the fact that he passed it around to the cast. We need to stop doing that.
Just one piece.
They don't get it. They're only there 26 days. If they were there for 39, I'd understand it a little bit. I would still be against it, but you can't shorten the season and give them more food on top of it.
I agree.
I saw the licorice distribution as a sign that Jeff might hang it up after Survivor 50. And we get a new host after that point.
Because he's getting soft?
He's getting soft. He's en route to retirement. He needs the cushion on the stool now. He's not kicking it the same way he used to.
I think Jeff will die in Tribal. Like, I think that's his goal. Jeff will die in a season that they will have to film with another host afterwards, right?
Oh, like just at the middle of the season, they just swap him out for somebody else?
Jeff dies at the merge, and they're like, hey, we had to medevac Jeff because he was 95.
Wait, who's going to narrate the Jeff medical evacuation then? Will it be Jeff there on his own? He'll say, oh, Jeff, how you feeling right now? I'm struggling, Jeff. He's just talking to himself. I like the idea more that at the midpoint of the season, they medically evacuate Jeff, bring in a new host, and they still call him Jeff. And they don't acknowledge the fact that they changed the actor midway through.
You know, I'm not in favor of AI-generated content for most things. I'd be fine with an AI Jeff. And like, an AI could do everything Jeff does in the exact same way.
Well, can the AI go to the store and pick up the licorice? I don't think so.
Jeff doesn't... You think Jeff goes to the store and gets his own licorice? I'll say this. I wonder... I don't know anything about Fiji. I feel like it's hard to get Twizzlers.
The Twizzlers came from the States. I think it was one of those situations where Jeff put the Twizzlers in his backpack, and then they got, like, heated up on the plane. They were melted together, and he got to tribal council that day, and he was like, this is kind of gross. I don't want to eat this. Do you know who would enjoy this? The contestants.
Here you go. These animals. I got 2 notes. Venus calls Maria's choice on the reward an act and a farce. I wouldn't call it much of an act. She decided not to act.
It sounds like Venus does not respect the duel.
Venus is not a fan of that choice, and Q says something along the lines of, we all know that if Venus had won this challenge, Maria and I would have never been in contention. And Venus is like, you don't know.
We know.
We all know.
We all
Venus, know. Like, to the bitter end, Venus is absolutely delusional. And I really think that there's a sense throughout this whole season that Venus is playing a different game. Like, I think in Venus's mind, Survivor is surviving the presence of others. And then we get this bad vibe between Q and Liz as well that isn't even worth talking about. Basically, Liz just hates Q and can't even put it into words.
Yeah, it's same old with the two of them. I can read off the vote if you're ready.
I'm so ready, because this is an interesting one.
So your final vote is 5 on Venus, 1 on Kenzie, 1 on Q. So the vote against Q comes from Venus, which makes sense. The vote against Kenzie comes from Ben, which is a sign that maybe their relationship is not as stable as we initially thought based on the whole situation with the panic attack earlier in the season. I don't think Ben was trying to send Kenzie home. I think this was more of an insurance policy in case there was a shot in the dark or an idol that was played.
Yeah.
You don't want to dump all of the votes on Venus.
Yeah.
And other important thing to note is that Kenzie and Liz contribute to the Venus elimination. So someone told them that information. My guess is that it was Charlie, but we'll probably find out next week.
Yeah, that's the big question, is how was Liz on the right side of this vote? That must have taken some convincing that we did not see.
I don't think it was necessarily convincing. I thought it was more so, we already have the numbers. You should hop on, that way you don't look bad in front of the jury and be left out of the vote. But honestly, like, you tell me what you think about this. It's almost equivalent in my mind to not be included in a vote and joining a vote at the last second because you don't really have another option. Like, I think this is still a negative for Kenzie and Liz either way.
It's at best a neutral move.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it doesn't hurt, but it's not building anything for them, right? Where for Maria, Charlie, and even Q, this comes away as like, oh, they were active in this. Charlie, I think, will be able to take a lot of credit for this move. Maria and Q are alongside him.
So my epitaph for Venus, I was drafting a couple because we were saying before the podcast that Venus is an interesting contestant in that she's a very memorable player, but there aren't a ton of memorable moments from her on the season. She's just perpetually, making fun of people in confessional. The one I have written down is this: R.I.P. Venus. The planet Venus is the second brightest natural object in the night sky right after the moon. Similarly, Venus was not the brightest player amidst the cast of Survivor 46. I had to do a little bit of research for that one.
That
Look
was
up Venus facts.
Oh my God.
I found another one about how like a day on Venus is the equivalent of 243 days on Earth. And I wanted to make some kind of comparison between, length of time of the planet Venus versus length of time of Venus on the show. but it didn't work out. So I rolled with the brightest object in the sky.
You're saying 243 daes on Earth pass for every day on Venus?
Yeah, because the planet rotates so slowly.
No, because Venus rotates so quick. Because Venus is closer, so Venus is going around the sun so fast compared to how fast we go.
Well, it's not based on moving around the sun. It's based around the actual moving of the planet itself. Moving around the sun is for a year.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're exactly right.
Yeah, see, I remember my astronomy. No, what is it?
That's astronomy.
Okay, I couldn't mess it up at the last second.
So impressive, and then you barely stuck that landing. You were wobbling.
I was scared. I was like, I hope I don't say the wrong one, because I get astronomy and astrology mixed up every once in a while.
They're both real.
Venus walks out in 7th place. Will we see Venus come back on a future season?
No.
Really?
No, I think Venus wants to be a villain so bad. I think you can't be this disliked by your tribe mates. Like, there's so much drama. We were talking about this before we hit record. People did not like her. People still do not like her. Like, and when I say people, I mean the other people in Ponderosa, the other people on 46. They are still kind of subtweeting each other. It's not really subtweeting anymore. Sub-posting on Instagram about one another. It's a bad vibe. If you brought 2 people back from 46 to be in another season, and it was Soda and Venus, so
that'd be great.
Soda would walk off. Like, there's too much vitriol for not enough substance, right? People don't like Q, right? Liz does not like Q, but Q brings some chaos, and it's fun chaos.
She's unappreciated by the other contestants on the cast, but the general fandom seems to love her. I disagree with you completely on this. I think Venus has officially overtaken Banu for me. I think she is the most likely returnee out of everybody that's been voted out so far. My only concern with the potential Venus return is I don't know if production, given its current hyper-positive state, if they are willing to recast someone who is more of an agitator. I think in Jeff's mind, he wants a season where it's happy-go-lucky, everyone's getting along with each other, and there's a good chance if you invite Venus to the cast, that might not happen.
Well, they cast her in the first place, right? Like,
but there's a difference between, like, you can't always fully anticipate how someone will act on the island when you initially cast them. There's a difference between selecting Venus once versus inviting her back, because now you know what to expect with her.
That's true.
So I think Venus will return. I don't know if it'll be at Survivor 50, because that just feels like such a iconic milestone for the show, where spots will be so limited. I don't know if she's like the best female villain that they could potentially bring on.
Yeah.
But down the line, Venus definitely has a chance. As a whole, I don't think she's the best player. And that really goes back to her social game, where even though she was knocking out those players that didn't trust her, like a Tevin, like a Hunter, like a Soda, it was almost meaningless because those players going to the jury and the players remaining in the game did not trust her and did not like her on a personal level. I don't think there was a single winning final tribal council combination for Venus. I think if you had a final 2 and it's Venus and Liz, I think Liz potentially beats her in the end.
Yeah. And there is no vote that Venus led that other people would say Venus led.
In her mind, she was unfairly judged, like based on her appearance, where she went onto the show. She was like the real pretty girl, and everyone was kind of intimidated by that, thinking, oh, she could be a flirt. She could draw people in. So in her mind, she was judged out of the get-go, and that kind of tanked her chances. And I think there is something to be said there where players are perceived differently based on their appearances. That's human nature, right? But at the same time, you have contestants from all different factions of this cast talking about what a poor social player Venus is. You had the Nami contestants like Hunter and Tevin that didn't get along with her. You had Siga members like Maria that literally pull Venus aside and say, you're coming on too strong. Like, you reach a certain point where once a certain percentage of the cast agrees that you're a poor social player, there needs to be an element of self-reflection there. And who knows, maybe if Venus comes back in a future season, everyone will love her and she'll learn from those mistakes that she had here.
Maybe. Probably not, but maybe.
Want to go to winners and losers?
Yeah, let's look forward. Who is your loser? Well, actually, let's knock out winners because I feel like we're on the same page on winners.
Winners, Charlie. Yeah. He resisted the urge to flip against that Q and Maria contingency, and that positions him at the final 6 with 2 clear shields that he can knock out, which means he needs just one fire-making win to potentially win the season.
Go ahead.
Loser, maybe we are on the same page here. I have Maria.
Okay, yeah, so do I.
Okay.
We need a name for this. We need a name for when we have the same winners and losers.
I don't know. We could call it like an eclipse or something where it lines up perfectly.
You're in an astrology kick here.
Well, since we're coming up with the name now, we might as well dedicate it to the Venus episode and call it the winner-loser eclipse. But she burns her bridges with Liz and Venus, and I think her threat level is magnified. I will be interested to see if both Q and Maria lose immunity next week, who would be the consensus target between the two of them. I lean towards Maria right now, but it could go either way.
Maria's win equity is definitely higher than Q's, but we'll see, right? I think the breakdown of this vote will be really interesting to see next week, right? Did this bringing in of Liz and Kenzie, does that boost Charlie's threat level in anybody's eyes? Or was this did Charlie position himself not as the leader of this vote, but as the emissary, right? Did Charlie go to Liz and Kenzie and say, Maria's leading this thing, it's Maria, me, and Q, or more importantly, Maria, Q, and me, join us so that you're in on the vote. While Maria is in a bad spot, depending on how Charlie handled this vote, it could protect Maria going into next week.
Do you have an honorable?
Yeah, the women of Iran. It felt like on her last moments of national TV, she tried to pull a Banu and win 1 million hearts right at the end. But I don't really know what she did for the women of Iran, so shout out to all of them. I hope they're doing well.
They're getting 2 shout outs. They're getting one in the episode and one in the podcast.
I wonder if Survivor is geo-blocked if Paramount Plus works in Iran, because it does not work in Puerto Rico. I wonder if it works anywhere outside the continental U.S.
But going to dishonorable mention, really no question for me here. It's Liz. She continues to receive a negative edit. She's asleep during the idol hunt. She's squeaking during tribal council. And she openly targets Q, thereby burning that potential jury vote. So Liz is the least likely contestant to win this season. But some people seem to really enjoy her. One of my friends at school watched the episode this week and called me right after. And he said that out of every player on the island, he would most want to see Liz return, which I thought was a bit of a hot take.
It's a wild take is what it is. I can't fathom a Liz return, to be honest with you.
I'm the same way, but she adds a lot to the show, I will say. She's kind of the perpetual punching bag of the edit, but she still adds something. Like, I think she's been a more pivotal character in the storyline of the season than Ben, who is probably a better player. But
that's a good point.
But that's everything I had for this week.
2 episodes left.
Next week, we'll go through Final 6. We will solidify our predictions for the finale and who wins in the different Final Tribal Council combinations. So I'll be interested to hear your thoughts, because I feel like last season we were in a situation where it was pretty obvious that Dee would win and that she would win regardless of who she faced in the end. This season might not be the same, especially if Maria goes out at Final 6. We might have a lot more variability in potential winners.
That'll be fun, because next week we'll probably go through the actual episode in like 30 minutes and then spend a good chunk discussing the permutations, right? So looking forward to that. And just because we don't always mention it, if you didn't find the show via social media, follow us at Survivor Analytics.
Yeah, especially on Threads.
Our
Threads account is about to take off. What was the last thing you posted on Threads? It's, we're ready or something like that?
I think I posted, we're so back. And then it's been 2 months.
It's been 2 months, and I don't know if it's back yet, but it will be back at some point. Maybe that can be your tradition, that you just post twice a year whenever the cast is announced and say, we're so back.
Check us out anywhere on social media. We're so back. TikTok, Instagram, Threads. We're on YouTube now, which is good. I feel like we should upload the video of the episodes to YouTube at some point. Maybe that's something we mess with in the off season, which is what I wanted to talk about here. If you are just joining us, if this is your first season of Survivor Analytics, listening live alongside 46, after 46 ends, over the summer, we stay on and we will be watching and discussing Cook Islands, Survivor Cook Islands, right?
Yeah, season 13. It's one that we considered watching a year ago. Last summer, we watched Survivor China. It was a close decision for Jack since it was his pick, but we watched China then. We pushed it off a whole year later. So we know the premise of that season. If you've seen it before, there's a pretty wild way they arrange the tribes that we'll need to talk about.
It's going to get crazy, but I just wanted to start mentioning that a couple weeks ahead of time so that, you know, if you're missing Survivor come June, don't worry, we'll still be here. But that's all I've got.
Yep. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week.